Hello, this is Midge. Welcome to Midge's Vinyl Gems, a guy in a hat that likes to talk about records. And it's been a crazy week since I've posted my first video. Amazingly, which I wasn't expecting, people have watched it, and I wasn't really expecting that at first. And for some reason, I started to try and quantify that in my head. So it became like more people have watched the video than you can get in a lift. And then it was more people have watched the video than you can get in 2 lifts. Then it was more people have watched the video than you can get in a minibus, and then more people have watched the video than you can comfortably have for health and safety reasons in a swimming pool, although I'm not sure about the figure for that. I thought it might be about 30, though it might be a bit higher than that. I'll look into that and get back to you. But then the numbers just kept going up, and it was crazy. It's just below 100, which to me is mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing that amount of people would watch this video. And I've had comments, I've had subscribers, which is even more mind-blowing. And a nice comment from Rob Walker, whose videos I've been watching for a few years now and really enjoying. So cheers, Rob. And thank you to everybody who watched the video or commented or subscribed. It's really spurred me on to do another one. So here I am with video number 2. So this time, I thought the last video went on for too long. I mean, it was nearly half an hour long and no one's got time for that sort of shizzle. So I thought I'd try and keep the video shorter and then perhaps do more of them. So without further ado, these are 5 more records, or possibly 5 more records if I don't go on too much, that I've been enjoying recently and I want to pass on and share to you. So the first one is Kraftwerk's first album from 1970. Originally issued on Philips, obviously this is a reissue, and it's strange with Kraftwerk because the first 3 Kraftwerk albums, if I'm right in saying, have never officially been reissued on CD or vinyl since the 70s. It's almost like the band have disowned the first 3 albums of their discography, which is really strange for a band of their stature. So this isn't readily available. It is, I mean, there's been so many reissues over the years. You can track it down reasonably easy if you look in the right places, but there's been no official reissues. I think there was talk a couple of years ago about them doing a Record Store Day reissue. So, but it never came off. I didn't think it would, to be honest with you. So the band won't reissue the first 3 albums for some reason. They just won't. But having said that, it is very much of its time. It's sort of like a lot of the early krautrock albums in terms of there's not a lot of melody there. There's a lot of experimentation, elements of rock. So it's not the sound that they're mostly well known for. There's not a lot of melody there. It's more experimental soundscapes and things like that. But having said that, it is a good album. It's produced by Conny Plank, the legendary German producer who produced a lot of the era's seminal krautrock albums. You've got your gatefold sleeve with the generator on. Obviously, photographs of the 2 mainstays, Ralf Hütter and Florian Schneider. And what is unusual about the sound of this album, one of the elements, is Florian Schneider's flute work, which is all over the album. And I don't think it's something that they put an element of in the later albums. So there's a distinctive flute element to a lot of the tracks. There's 4 tracks on the album, all long form, around about 10 minutes. The standout track to me is Ruckzuck, which is brilliant. It's got like a driving motoric beat, and a big flute riff that runs all the way through it, and it's a superb track. The rest of the tracks are more a mixture of this, I think it's megahertz, that's like got an ambient type drifting sound all the way through it. And the other tracks, Von Himmelhoch and Stratovarius, the more experimental soundscapes. There's elements of rock in them, like there's the passages of drum solos and things like that. But there's a lot of electronic sounds. There's a lot of sort of atmospheric sort of soundscapes. Von Himmelhoch has elements of it's like a war zone almost, like bombs exploding and things like that. So there's a lot of soundscapes on this album. It's not like your typical driving melodic Kraftwerk sounds of the later era, but I still recommend it. It's more experimental, so it's probably, it's if you're into that sort of early krautrock era sort of things, you'll probably get a lot more from this album. But I've been playing it a lot recently and really enjoying it. You've got the pop art cover. The second album had the same traffic cone but in green, so a bit like Andy Warhol and the Velvet Underground. Instead of fruit, they went for road safety, which is commendable. But yeah, I recommend that. It's an experimental listen. They got better, but it's still worth a listen. So that's Kraftwerk from 1970. The next album I want to talk about is a recent release by an artist I'm really fond of, for want of a better term, Richard Dawson. If you've never heard any Richard Dawson albums before, he's sort of like an experimental folk musician in terms of he uses a folk idiom. He sings in a very distinctive folky type way, but there's a lot of experimentalism in his guitar playing. His guitar playing is superb. His albums normally have a concept to them, and this one's no exception. Although this is a bit of a departure for Richard because it's very much a stripped down album. His last album, for example, had a 41-minute opening track, and it's amazing musician, very experimental. But for this one, this is called The End of the Middle. And for this one, he wanted a more stripped back sound. He wanted a more domestic stripped back sound. And so basically it's Richard with his distinctive guitar playing. There's a drummer, there's blasts of clarinet that go through it, because his music it does have an avant-garde sort of edge to it. So it's not the traditional folk music. In fact, to describe him as folk is probably a bit misleading. But his work is superb. It's very unique, it's very distinctive. And he's a great storyteller as well. So, for example, this album, it's very much sort of like a domestic album in terms of a lot of the scenarios in the album and a lot of the stories on the album are everyday life. So you've got stories about gardeners. You've got stories about people moving house and reflecting. And it's clever in that a lot of the songs, they show like another side, if you see what I mean. So, for example, there's a song about somebody moving house, and the man in the song is reflecting on his childhood and elements that happened within his childhood, his dad having a breakdown and things, and how that affected his upbringing, and then moving house has led him to reflect on that. So it's really clever how he does it. There's a song about bullies on here in which a guy talks about being bullied at school, and then his son ends up being a bully, and the reflections between that stage and the stage he's going through now, the parallels to it. There's a song about a really great song about a man going to a wedding reception who was obviously having trouble with his partner, and is obviously anxious and depressed. And the lyrics to these songs are superb. The detail in them and the everyday things that he talks about are great. So there's a reflection at the wedding. And he ends up having an argument with his girlfriend and being thrown out onto the road on the way home. He ends up getting drunk and singing karaoke. Richard Dawson is just such a great storyteller. And this edition actually comes with a lyric booklet. So there's so many cool quotable lyrics in Richard Dawson's songs, especially with the references to TV shows: Cash in the Attic, A Place in the Sun, Deal or No Deal, Box number 17 is open to reveal a wound that's never healed. Just great lines like that all the way through. And like I say, this is a very stripped back album, and it's basically stories, and he's a really great storyteller, and the things he talks about you can really identify with. And each song is a story from a different point of view. But it's just a great song, and it finishes with a really touching song about, and unusually again for Richard, he ends the song on not an acoustic guitar song. It's using a lot of synthesizers, and his partner Sally also sings on it, and it's about two perspectives of how a man feels when he gives birth to his daughter, and what his intentions are, and what he's going to do for her, and whether it's enough. And his partner comes in at the end, and when the daddy's old and in hospital, and her showing how much love that she has for him. So obviously he's been doing something right. So it's just, honestly, I can't recommend this enough. It's a great album, and like I say, Richard Dawson is a great storyteller, bit avant-garde. So it's worth checking out. Check out a few of his videos on YouTube, but the storytelling and the songs are just brilliant, superb. Can't recommend this enough. This is a Dinked edition, they call it. It's a conglomerate of record shops that have got together, and every time a certain artist or new and up-and-coming artist releases something, they do a special edition of it, so they call them Dinked editions. So this is a yellow vinyl edition on lovely yellow vinyl. It comes with the lyric booklet, and also it comes with a bonus 7-inch, which is cool, which has got 2 additional tracks on it that aren't on the album, which is really good as well. You know, I can't recommend it enough. So that's Richard Dawson, End of the Middle. Superb album, absolutely superb. Next up, an artist that obviously I know about, but I haven't tried any of his solo albums. So the next one is John Cale's Helen of Troy. That's such a great cover. There's been a few John Cale reissue series from the start of this year that's been coming about. So obviously I know about John Cale from the Velvet Underground. I've never tried any of his solo albums, so I thought it was time to try one. So with this reissue series, I thought I'd pick one, and this is the one I picked. You don't often see his albums second hand, and when you do, they're usually quite expensive. So I thought I'll just go for a new copy rather than trying to track down an original. That cover's fantastic, isn't it? He's in a straitjacket, and presumably Helen of Troy is trying to entice him to do something. I don't know. It doesn't really explain the concept, to be honest with you. It was released on Ireland in 1975, and I've been really enjoying it. I like John Cale from his Velvet Underground albums, and I always felt that when John Cale left the Velvet Underground, a lot of the experimentalism and a lot of the sort of quirky production techniques went with him, and they were never this obviously a cool band, but I think a lot of the ideas and the quirks went with him. So for this album, like I say, early 70s album, it reminds me a lot of the first Roxy Music album, so I suppose you'd call it art rock in a way. His voice isn't for everybody. It's kind of like a monotone type voice, so he's not got a great singing voice, but it doesn't matter. It's how you deliver it, isn't it, at the end of the day. And the thing about John Cale is he was also been establishing a career as a producer, so he did do a lot of production work around this time. So he's multi-instrumentalist, arranger, composer. So he's obviously a very talented bloke. So like I say, the album has a lot of variation to it. There's a lot of cool production ideas. There's a lot of variation in the songs. But like I say, it does have like a Roxy Music type feel for it to me. And you've got a few big hitters playing on it as well. You've got Chris Spedding, Pat Donaldson. You've also got Brian Eno on here, who plays synthesizer, and Phil Collins on drums. Phil Collins seems to pop up everywhere, and it's that sort of thing in the 70s where artists played with each other's bands all the time. We don't seem to see much of that now, but especially on labels, they just jump across and help out. So there's a lot of big hitters on here. Song wise, there's a lot of variation. There's a cover of Jonathan Richman's Pablo Picasso, which I love that song, because John Cale had just finished producing the Modern Lovers' first album, and that was a song that was on it. But I think the album was delayed, so John Cale got the first snatch at that, and it's just such a funny song. Pablo Picasso, all the girls are after him, all the girls are eyeing him up, and no one calls him an asshole. So, what a great idea for a song. Who'd write a song about Pablo Picasso not being an arsehole to girls? It's just fantastic, just brilliant. In terms of John Cale's songs, there's a great song on here called Sudden Death. It's the last track on the album, and it sort of talks about tourists being abroad and somebody being taken out by a sniper, and all the stuff that goes on in foreign countries, people getting bumped off, and and in the last verse, the tourists all decide to leave because they don't want anything to do with sudden death. It's just, lyrically, it's really interesting as well, the sort of ideas he has for his songs. There's a great song on here called I Keep a Close Watch, which is sort of like a ballad, and it's such a superb ballad. John Cale apparently had very high hopes for the song, and he even imagined Frank Sinatra singing it, which is a bit of a jump, but I can see where he's coming from. It's a great ballad, I Keep a Close Watch. There's another song. I think John Cale was a bit of a closet Elvis fan, because there's a cover of "Baby What You Want Me to Do" on it, which is like an old Jimmy Reed blues song, and I think Elvis did it for his comeback special. So there's a cover of that on here. My Maria, which is another great song, lots of choral backups, effects and things like that, and string sections. Like I said, you can tell it's a John Cale production, because there's so many good ideas for the songs. The thing with the album is, apparently John Cale wasn't happy that Island released it. In his eyes, it wasn't finished, so he saw it as more of like an album of demos. It wasn't finished to his satisfaction. So he made a run of albums for Island in the 70s. I think this was the last one, and they parted ways because of a falling out. But he saw this as an album full of demos. Some of the songs do sound like they could do with a bit more production or a few more ideas and things like that. But on the whole, I've really enjoyed this album. I certainly would get another one. And Chris Spedding plays guitar on here, and his guitar work on here is fantastic. It's a really good album. So, yeah, I'd pick up another one. I'd definitely pick up another John Cale album. So, yeah, I've been enjoying that. Another album. This is another new album, or newish album. This was released at the back end of last year, and I've only just got around to getting a vinyl copy of it. I'll be honest, if I'd have picked up on it early, it would definitely have been in my list of best albums of last year. It's absolutely superb, and it's by somebody called MJ Lenderman, and it's called Manning Fireworks, and it's absolutely superb. If you've never heard any MJ Lenderman, just try this album. Honestly, it's absolutely superb. It's sort of indie rockish. It's one of those albums, it's sort of like, it's got a really sort of ramshackle feel to it, but in a really good way. The playing's really loose, and it's one of those ones where you listen to it, you think it could fall apart any moment, but it doesn't. And it's got bags of melody. The guitar playing's great, and if you want a comparison, I always think of it in terms of, it sounds a bit like some of Neil Young's albums in the 70s, in the mid-70s, where they sounded really sort of ramshackle and loose, and, that almost amateurish in a way, but gloriously so. And MJ Lenderman's got sort of like a slacker delivery in a way. I always think he sounds like someone's just dragged him out of bed to do a vocal take. His vocal delivery is quite slurry, but just so endearing and fantastic. And it's got like a country sort of rootsy feel to it as well. So, like, again, with Neil Young's 70s albums, they've got a fiddle player, and it does sound very Neil Youngish at times, especially of that period. But the songwriting is great. The lyrics are bizarre. The lyrics don't make a lot of sense, but there's a lot of great choice lines in here. So much melody. And it's just a great album. There's some really sort of choice lyrics on here. I'll see if I can find any. So you say, I've got a funny face, but it makes me money. You can put your clothes back on, she's leaving you. And there's a song about the actor Rip Torn. There's just some great lines in here. She's Leaving You is a superb song. Wristwatch is great. I've got a wristwatch that's a compass and a cell phone. It's so many great songs on here. You Don't Know the Shape I'm In is a really achingly beautiful ballad. It's a great album, and it was reissued. Like I say, it was released towards the end of last year, but it was reissued early this year on a smoky green coloured vinyl, so I picked up a copy then. But it's such a great album, honestly. If you've never heard it, I highly recommend it. And that's MJ Lenderman's Manning Fireworks. Okay, lastly, it's coming up to 20 minutes now, so let's get on with it. If I do a lot more videos, it'll probably become apparent that I like a lot of different genres. I like a lot of different things, like we all do. But I do like a lot of weird shit as well, and I can't really think of any other way of describing it. I love a lot of soundscape type music, where perhaps music that doesn't really make sense or isn't even music, if you see what I mean. It's sound for the sake of sound, and I love the sound of sound, as pretentious as that may sound. So just people who use raw elements of sound to create soundscapes and music. I'm really like a lot of that sort of stuff. And one of the artists that I really like is called Aaron Dillaway. He's an American, and he uses tape loops and effects to make beats and sort of soundscapes and lots of weird sounds. But the great thing about Aaron Dillaway is a lot of the stuff he makes is bizarre, and it really is disturbing. He made an album a couple of years ago that absolutely blew my tiny mind called The Gag File, and it's probably one of the most disturbing albums I own in terms of how he makes sound. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, and it's such a superb album. I'm not going to talk about it a lot now because I'll probably mention it in more detail in a later video. But anyway, he makes a series of bizarre soundscapes. A lot of them he releases on tape through his Bandcamp, so they don't often get a vinyl reissue, and when they do, they go pretty quickly. Usually pretty limited editions. So if I see one, I tend to try and grab it really quickly. And this is the one that I've just got. Look at that, what a great cover. Freak Out Your Friends, and I'm telling you, Aaron Dillaway certainly does freak out your friends. It's been reissued on the Bizarre label, which I've not heard of, and this one is it's a recording of a live show he did in 2015 in the UK, funnily enough. So it's like a 35-minute set spread over two sides of vinyl, and it builds up. It's really clever how it builds. Apparently it's one of his favourite shows that he's ever done. So, but again, absolutely bizarre. So it starts off really slowly, introduces sort of like a looped beat that sounds like somebody walking in welly boots, and it sort of builds from there. So then it builds into like I say, sort of like a mechanical sounding beat that goes through it. Then he introduces lots of scary type noises. Then he introduces voices and bizarre warped voices, and halfway through it just degenerates into a huge mind-splitting scream and white noise. And then it's great. It just builds and builds. It's hard to describe it if you've not heard any of his stuff, but if you like weird stuff, weird sort of soundscapey stuff, Aaron Dillaway's your man. It's superb. But like I say, the thing I enjoy most about his work is it's quite disturbing, and it's not for the faint of heart. Obviously, there's nothing approaching a melody on here, but it's just, I love this sort of stuff. I can't even tell you why I love it so much. I just do. But that's Aaron Dillaway live at the Tusk Festival in 2015. So if you're a bit of an adventurer, check out his Bandcamp and you'll know exactly what I mean if you try a few samples on here. But like I say, it doesn't often release a lot of stuff on vinyl, so when I see it, I get it. But I've been listening to this late at night on headphones, freaking myself out. But yeah, it's bizarre, it's weird, it's fantastic, I love it. So that's it for this time. So yeah, coming up to 23 minutes, let's leave it at that. I hope you liked the video. Again, thank you for watching my other videos, and hopefully there'll be some more. So thank you very much. And this is Midge signing off. See ya.